Let me tell you about a phone call I received on a Thursday morning in April, 14 months after my son told me he no longer considered me his family. He called at 9:15. I was in my garden, the back garden, where the tulips had just come in, the red ones that come back every spring, no matter what has happened in the year between. I saw his name on the screen, and I sat down on the garden bench and I answered. "Mum," he said. His voice had the specific quality of a person who's been building toward a call and is now discovering that building toward it was easier than actually making it. "Mitchell," I said. A pause. "I wanted to... I've been thinking," he said. "About things. About the situation." "All right," I said. "I wanted to ask," he said, "about the college fund. For the kids. Whether you still have..." He stopped. I waited. "The fund you set up," he said. "The one you mentioned a few years ago. For their education. I was wondering if that's still something you were planning." The tulips were very red in the April morning light. I had put those bulbs in the ground 23 years ago when Mitchell was 12 and his sister Angela was 8, and the garden was something I started because I needed something that would grow reliably in unreliable times. The tulips had never let me down. I thought about the account I had opened at First National Bank of Harlow the spring after Mitchell and Jenna's first child was born. 18 years ago. I thought about the deposits I had made every month for 18 years. Not large, not dramatic, just consistent the way I do things. I thought about the account growing the way accounts grow when you leave them alone and add to them steadily and don't touch them for 2 decades. I thought about what the account had held when I called the Harlow Community Education Foundation 16 months ago, and I thought about what it held now. "The fund," I said. "Yes," Mitchell said. "It's been put to use," I said. A silence. "What does that mean?" he said. "It means," I said calmly in the garden with the red tulips, "that the money was designated for educational purposes, and it is now serving educational purposes." Another silence. Longer. "Mum," he said, "what did you do?" "I donated it," I said, "to the Harlow Community Education Foundation. It funds scholarships for first-generation college students in this county. The first 3 scholarships were awarded in the fall. I attended the ceremony." The silence that followed this was the longest of the call. Then Mitchell said very quietly, "All of it." "All of it," I said. "How much?" he started. $81,240, I said. "With the interest." I heard him exhale. Not in anger, in the specific sound of someone absorbing a consequence that they understand in the moment of absorbing it, they had brought entirely upon themselves. "Oh," he said. "The tulips are very beautiful this year," I said. He did not respond to this. "Mitchell," I said, "when you called your sister last March and told her you were, and I'm using your word here, done with me, when you told her that as far as you were concerned, I wasn't your family anymore, do you remember what I said to you when she relayed that message?" Silence. "I said I was sorry to hear it," I said. "And I said that I hoped you'd take the time you needed. And I meant both of those things." "I know," he said. "And I also, though I didn't say this to Angela because it wasn't her message to carry, I also began to think about what it meant. For the things I had been planning. For the things I had built for a family that had decided to cut me out of it." He said nothing. "The money was always for education," I said. "It's doing that. The children of this community are going to college because of what was in that account. That seems right to me." "Those were my children's college funds," he said. Finally, quietly. "They were money I saved," I said, "with the intention of giving it to your children when the time came. That intention was part of a relationship. When you ended the relationship, the intention needed a new home." He was quiet for a very long time. "I didn't know you'd do that," he said. "I know," I said. Is there any way?" he started. "Mitchell," I said gently, "let's not have that conversation on the phone on a Thursday morning. If you want to really talk about what happened and what we are to each other, call me again. I'll answer." He said he would call. He called the following Sunday. That conversation is later in this story. First, let me tell you how we got here, all the way from the beginning. My name is Vivian. I am 68 years old recently enough that I still occasionally think of myself as 67 by mistake. I live in Harlow, a mid-sized city in the Midwest, in the house where I raised my two children after their father and I separated when Mitchell was 9 and Angela was 5. The house is paid off. The garden is mine. The tulips are non-negotiable. I was a pharmacist for 34 years. Not a glamorous career in the way of television doctors or the particular prestige of certain medical specialties, but a career that mattered in the specific daily way of someone who stands between people and the medications they need and makes sure they get the right thing safely. I knew my patients. I knew their families. I knew who was managing diabetes and who had just been diagnosed and who was picking up prescriptions for a parent who could no longer drive. I retired 4 years ago. I saved carefully for my entire career. Not dramatically, I did not play the stock market, did not make bold financial moves, did not build a fortune. I saved the way my parents taught me consistently monthly without touching the principle letting time do the work. My parents were the children of people who had lived through the Depression, and the habits of that inheritance keep something back. Don't spend what you don't have. Plan further ahead than feels necessary were the habits they passed to me and that I have kept my entire adult life. My ex-husband Robert moved to Phoenix when Mitchell was 14. He remarried, has 2 stepchildren, has been a presence in our children's lives, in the variable, complicated way of divorced fathers who did not do the early work and arrived late to the relationship. Mitchell has more of a relationship with him than Angela does. I have no particular feelings about this. People find their families where they find them. My daughter Angela is 41. She lives 40 minutes from me in the same city, is a nurse practitioner, and is the specific kind of person who calls when there is nothing in particular to report, which is the quality I most value in a person who loves you. She has a husband named Carl, who is steady and good, and who makes remarkable barbecue. She has 2 daughters who call me Grandma Viv, and who I see regularly and who are without question the most interesting people I know. My son Mitchell is 44. He lives in Maplewood, a suburb 45 minutes away. He works in insurance risk management specifically and is good at it. He is organized, analytical, and capable of the specific warmth that appears in people who keep it carefully managed until the right moment. He married Jenna 11 years ago. Jenna is 42. Let me tell you about Jenna because Jenna is important to this story, and I want to be as fair about her as I can, while also being honest about what I observed. Jenna is from a family in which family dynamics, specifically the dynamics between wives and their mothers-in-law, are organized along very clear lines. Her mother Diane has told me on multiple occasions that her own mother-in-law was difficult, and that she had to draw boundaries early, and that the lesson she passed to Jenna was to establish yourself in the marriage first, everything else second. I have met Diane 8 times. 7 of those times she said something that could be interpreted as a comment on my relationship with Mitchell. This is a frequency I have thought about. Jenna absorbed her mother's lessons. I do not say this as an excuse for Mitchell's behavior. Mitchell is 44 years old and capable of making his own choices. But I say it as context because context matters, and because the story of what happened between me and my son is not a simple story of ingratitude or unkindness. It is more complicated than that, and the complications involve the specific way a marriage can, over years, become a unit that orients its values and its loyalties in ways that were not there at the beginning. Mitchell and Jenna have 3 children, Lucas, who is 17, Maya, who is 15, and Caden, who is 12. Lucas, Maya, and Caden are the reason the account at First National Bank existed. They are also the reason it no longer exists in the form Mitchell expected. Let me tell you about the account first, and then I'll tell you about the disowning, because the account came first by 16 years. I opened the account the spring after Lucas was born. He was 6 months old. I was 50 years old. I had been a grandmother for 6 months, and the specific quality of it, the particular love that grandparenting produces, different from parenting less burdened by daily responsibility, more purely in love with a person. For existing was still relatively new and entirely overwhelming. I went to First National Bank on a Tuesday in April. I told the account manager, a young woman named Cecily, who had the specific earnest quality of someone who is new to the job and takes everything seriously, that I wanted to open a savings account designated for educational expenses for my grandchildren. "How many grandchildren?" Cecily asked. "One so far," I said. "Possibly more. Should we set up separate accounts or one?" I thought about this. "One," I said. "I'll keep track of the intention. If there are more, the intention can expand." There were more. Maya 2 years later, Caden 4 years after that. I adjusted the intention. I deposited $200 the day I opened the account. Not a round number, the amount I had available that week after the mortgage and the utilities and the groceries. I set up an automatic transfer, $150 per month, the first of every month, from my checking account to the educational savings account. $150. Not dramatic. Over 18 years, $32. $400 in principal contributions alone, not counting interest. I increased the contribution twice to $200 when I paid off the car, to $250 when the mortgage was paid off. I made additional deposits when I had extra tax refund, the year I worked extra shifts, the year I sold some furniture from the house and made more than I expected. I told Mitchell about the account when Lucas was 2 years old. Just mentioned it. "I've been putting something away for the kids' education. It won't be everything, but it'll be something." He said, "You don't have to do that, Mom." "I know," I said. "I want to." He smiled. He was 30 years old and newly married, and the account was abstract and far away, and he said, "You don't have to do that." And he meant it. And he was also at 30, not thinking yet about college tuition for a 2-year-old. Fathers don't always think about what's coming until it's very close. Mothers and grandmothers tend to think about it sooner. I thought about it for 18 years. I added to it. I watched it grow. I calculated periodically what 3 children's college educations might cost in 10, 15, 20 years, and I adjusted when I could, and I didn't panic when I couldn't. By the time of the disowning, the account held $81,240. By the time of Mitchell's April phone call, it held nothing. The relationship between me and Mitchell did not break suddenly. It eroded. I want to use that word carefully because erosion is different from damage. Damage implies a specific blow, a moment of impact. Erosion implies something more gradual, more patient, more geological. The slow work of a current on stone. The barely perceptible removal of something solid month by month until one day you look and the stone is thin and fragile where it used to be solid. That is what happened. The relationship between me and Mitchell eroded over the 11 years of his marriage to Jenna in a process that had a direction and a logic I could trace in retrospect, but that was difficult to name clearly while it was happening, because erosion is hard to see when you are the stone. Let me give you the shape of it. Year 1. Normal. The first year of a new marriage has a specific quality the nuclear family is forming. The new couple is establishing itself, extended family relationships settle into their new configuration. I gave Mitchell and Jenna space. I did not call too often. I waited for invitations before I came. Year 2, the first shifts. Nothing dramatic. A holiday where the plan changed at the last minute and they went to Jenna's parents instead. A birthday dinner that was relocated to a restaurant rather than my house, which had always been the birthday dinner venue. Small adjustments, individually explainable, collectively suggestive. Year 3. Lucas and the specific redistribution of attention that a first grandchild produces. I was present at the birth in the early weeks at the milestones. I was also careful. I did not intrude. I waited to be invited. I brought food, and I left when it was appropriate to leave. Jenna's mother was there more. This is not a complaint. This is information. Diane lived closer. Diane and Jenna had the particular bond of a mother and daughter who have talked every day since Jenna left home. Diane's presence was more constant, more woven into the daily fabric. Mine was more occasional, more formal, more like a guest in a house where Diane was a resident. I adjusted. I told myself this was the natural order, that the maternal grandmother's side is often more present, that this was not a reflection of my worth to the family, that what mattered was the quality of the time I had, not the quantity. I was right about some of this, and wrong about some of it, and the part I was wrong about was the part where I told myself the erosion was natural. It was not entirely natural. Some of it was being managed. Year 5, the first clear moment. I had been invited to Lucas's birthday party. He was turning 3. I arrived with a gift. I arrived at the time I had been told. I stayed for 2 hours. I left when it seemed appropriate. The following week, I learned not from Mitchell, from Angela, who had also been at the party, and who had overheard something that Jenna had told her friend at the party, that she wished Mitchell's mother would take the hint and not stay so long. I had stayed 2 hours at my grandson's birthday party. Angela told me this with the specific tension of someone who is trying to give you information you need, while also not wanting to be the cause of conflict. I didn't know how to tell you, she said. You did the right thing telling me, I said. Are you okay? She said. Yes, I said. I was not okay in the sense of being unhurt. I was okay in the sense of being a 62-year-old woman who has been through divorce and single parenthood and 34 years of pharmaceutical work, and who has a high tolerance for being required to manage her responses. I did not say anything to Mitchell. This was a choice I made and later reconsidered. Year 7, the conversation about holidays. Mitchell called me in October to talk about Christmas. He said he and Jenna had been discussing it, and they had decided to spend Christmas at Jenna's parents' house this year, and possibly going forward, as it was more centrally located for Jenna's family. What about Thanksgiving? I said. We're doing Friendsgiving this year, he said, with some of Jenna's friends and their families. Christmas and Thanksgiving, I said. I know, Mum, he said, but the kids are young, and Jenna's family she's very close to them, and Christmas at your house can be a lot for the kids. Christmas at my house can be a lot, I repeated. Just the travel, he said quickly, and it's a lot of people at your house. My house at Christmas was me, Angela, Carl, Angela's girls, and whatever friends I invited. A normal Christmas, not a crowd, not a chaos. I said, I understand. I did not say this is Jenna's decision. I did not say my grandchildren are growing up, and I am being moved to the edge of their lives. I said I understood, and I sent Christmas gifts, and I video called on Christmas morning, and the calls were pleasant and brief. Year 8 and 9, the drift becomes structure. What had been exceptions, the relocated holiday, the Friendsgiving, the birthday party comment, became the established pattern. I saw the grandchildren at Mitchell's house 4 to 6 times a year in visits that were comfortable, but had the quality of scheduled events rather than the warmth of natural family contact. Lucas started calling me Vivienne instead of Grandma at some point in Year 8. I did not know if this was his choice or something that had been suggested to him. I did not ask. Year 10, the specific acceleration. There was a visit in the spring of Year 10 where I arrived at Mitchell and Jenna's house for a Sunday lunch that I had been invited to, and where Jenna was cool in the specific way that people are cool when they have been warm before and have decided to stop. Not rude, not unpleasant. The temperature of someone who has made a decision and is implementing it without drama. After the visit, Mitchell called me. He said, Mum, I want to talk to you about how you are with Jenna. I said, what about how I am with Jenna? She finds you, he started. Tried again. She feels like you can be critical of her choices, of the way she parents. She finds it hard. I thought about this carefully. Can you give me an example? I said. She mentioned that when you were over last month, you said something about Maya's diet. I had at a lunch 4 weeks earlier asked if Maya was eating enough vegetables. Maya was 13 and had the eating habits of a teenager, which I was aware of, and I had said once, and I believed gently, "Are you getting enough vegetables?" to Maya. who had laughed and said, "Grandma Vivian, you sound like a pharmacist," and gone back to her sandwich. This was the critical comment about Maya's diet. I asked if she was eating vegetables, I said. "I know," Mitchell said, "but Jenna, she's very careful about not putting pressure on the kids around food, and she felt like you were undermining that." I looked at my pharmacist's hands. 34 years of those hands, counting pills, reading prescriptions, knowing what the body needs and what it doesn't. "I'll be more careful," I said. I was more careful. It did not help, because by year 10, careful was not the variable. The variable was a marriage that had decided gradually and with considerable thoroughness that its orientation was toward one family and not the other. And the variable was a son who had spent 10 years choosing management over clarity, who had told himself he was keeping the peace and had instead been allowing an erosion he could have stopped. Year 11, the letter. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March, a physical letter, which I note because it is unusual in this era to receive a letter for a purpose like this, and because the choice of a physical letter rather than a call and email, a text, carries specific meaning. A physical letter is formal. It is a document. It is the choice of someone who wants what they are saying to be on record and not subject to the ambiguities of a conversation. It was from Mitchell. It was 3 pages long, typed, not handwritten, which told me something. The typing said, "I have organized this. I have drafted it. This is not something I wrote in an emotional moment. I am going to summarize it because sharing it in full would be more than this story requires, and because some of the specifics are things I will keep to myself, for reasons of dignity, mine and Mitchell's both." The letter said essentially the following: that Mitchell had decided that his relationship with me was causing damage to his marriage and his family that he was no longer willing to accept. That he had, over many conversations with Jenna and with a therapist he and Jenna had been seeing together, come to understand that the patterns in our relationship were, one, two, not healthy, and that he needed to prioritize his immediate family. That he was taking a step back, his phrase, from the relationship with me indefinitely, and that he hoped I would understand that this was not about love, but about what was necessary for our family unit. That during this period of stepping back, he would prefer I not contact him directly. If I needed to communicate, I could do so through Angela. That the grandchildren would not be available for visits during this period. The letter ended, "I want you to know I love you, and I hope we can find our way to a healthier dynamic eventually. But for now, this is what Jenna and I need." I read it 3 times. I sat with it for the rest of that Tuesday. I thought about the account at First National Bank, which held at that moment $80,394. I thought about the tulips in the garden, which would come up in April whether I was paying attention to them or not, because tulips are reliable in that way. I thought about 34 years of being a pharmacist, of being a person who counts things and manages things and makes sure the right thing gets to the right person at the right time. I thought about 18 years of deposits, and I thought about the children, Lucas 17, Maya 15, Caden 12, who were being told by implication of the letter not to see their grandmother and who may or may not have understood what they were being told or why. On Wednesday, I wrote back. 1 paragraph. Handwritten. It said, "Mitchell, I received your letter. I am sorry to hear what you've described. I love you and I love your children. I hope you find what you're looking for in this time. I'll be here when you're ready." I mailed it Thursday. Then I called First National Bank. I want to tell you about the process of what I did and why I did it in the order that I did, because the order matters, and because I think people imagine these moments of decision as more impulsive than they actually are. I did not call the bank in anger. I was not angry. I want to be precise about this. Not performing calm, actually not angry. What I was clear. The letter from Mitchell had provided a clarity that 18 months of managed erosion had not provided. It had said in 3 typed pages exactly what the situation was. The situation was my son had chosen to remove me from his family. The account at First National Bank was a financial expression of my place in that family. Those two facts together required a decision. I called the bank on Friday, 2 days after receiving the letter, 1 day after sending my response. I spoke to a manager named Gerald. I said, "I have a savings account I've been maintaining for educational purposes. I'd like to explore options for donating it to an educational organization." Gerald said, "We can help with that. Do you have an organization in mind?" I had, in the 24 hours, between sending my letter to Mitchell and calling the bank, done research. I knew Harlow. I had lived here for 38 years. I knew there was a community foundation. I had attended years ago a dinner for it. I had seen in the local paper stories about the scholarships it provided. "The Harlow Community Education Foundation," I said. "I know them," Gerald said. "Excellent organization. They do significant work with first-generation college students." "That's what I understand," I said. "I can help you set up the transfer," he said. "Is this something you want to do in full or in installments?" "In full," I said. A pause. "All right," he said. "Let me pull up your account." He pulled it up. He said the balance. I confirmed. He said, "This is a significant gift. The foundation will be very grateful." "I hope it helps some students," I said. "It will," he said. We processed the paperwork over the following week. The transfer cleared on a Friday. The following Monday, I received a call from a woman named Helen Dabrowski, who was the executive director of the Harlow Community Education Foundation, who had been told about the gift by Gerald, who wanted to thank me and talk about what the money would do. We talked for 45 minutes. She told me about the foundation's scholarship program. The students they served, the first-generation college students from Harlow, who needed financial support to access higher education. The specific stories of young people whose lives were changed by the ability to go. She told me the gift would fund 3 full scholarships immediately and contribute to an endowment that would generate scholarship funding in perpetuity. Perpetuity. The money I had saved month by month for 18 years would be helping students go to college in Harlow for not 4 years, not for Lucas and Maya and Caden forever, every year. Students who needed it, who would never know my name, who would go to college because of an account I opened when my grandson was 6 months old. I felt at the end of that call something I had not expected to feel so cleanly: rightness. Not satisfaction in the sense of revenge, satisfied, not that. Rightness in the sense of a thing having found its correct home. The money was for education. Education had it. That was right. In September, Helen invited me to the scholarship ceremony where the first 3 recipients were announced. I went. 3 young people from Harlow, a young woman who was the first in her family to go to college, a young man whose parents had immigrated from Guatemala, a young woman from a single-parent household whose mother worked 2 jobs. I sat in the audience and I watched them accept their scholarships, and I thought about the tulips in the garden, which come up every year, no matter what happened in the year before. 14 months. I want to tell you what 14 months of being cut off by your son actually looks like, because I think people who haven't experienced it imagine it as one sustained dramatic thing, and it is not. It is quieter than that, and stranger. It is a Thursday in May when you would normally have called him, and you don't call him. And the not calling has a weight that settles in the afternoon and is still there in the evening. It is Lucas's birthday in June. He turned 18. He is legally an adult. He does not call, and you sit with the birthday card you bought and did not send, because sending it would have been contacting Mitchell's household, and Mitchell had asked you not to contact him directly. You send the card through Angela. Angela, who is the fulcrum of all of this, the sister carrying information in both directions, the person who loves her brother and her mother, and who has been put in the specific, unfair position of the person who did nothing wrong, being asked to do the work of everyone who did. Angela called me every Sunday during the 14 months, not to report, just to call, to be my daughter when my son had decided to be something else. She came to dinner on Thursdays. She brought her girls, who called me Grandma Viv, and who sat in my kitchen and did their homework at my table, and who I was aware had cousins they occasionally saw, and whose grandmother had not disowned their mother. Angela never said a bad word about Mitchell to me. This was the right call, and also I understood a disciplined one that cost her something. "He's going through something," she said once in a Sunday call in the middle of the 14 months. "I know," I said. "Do you think he'll—" she started. "I don't think about it," I said. "I'll answer when he calls. Until then, I'm in the garden." She laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was mine. The thing I say when I mean I am taking care of myself, and you don't have to worry. What I actually did in the 14 months I gardened. More than usual, the back garden expanded into the side yard, a project I had been putting off for years that required a weekend of clearing and then several weekends of planting, and that now in the following spring has come in beautifully. I volunteered. The Harlow Community Education Foundation. Now that I had a relationship with Helen Dabrowski, asked if I would be willing to serve on a scholarship review committee. I said yes. I read applications. I read about first-generation college students from Harlow, their essays, their circumstances, their specific and various hopes for what education would give them. It was not a consolation prize. I want to be clear about that. It was genuinely meaningful work, and it would have been meaningful work regardless of what had happened with Mitchell. But it was also, I will be honest, a way of understanding where the money had gone and whether it had gone to the right place. It had. I attended in November a dinner for the foundation where the first 3 scholarship recipients spoke. The young man from Guatemala, his name was Ernesto, and he was 19 years old and wanted to be an engineer, stood at the podium and spoke about his father, who had worked on construction sites for 20 years in a country where he didn't speak the language, and about what it meant to stand in a room and be told that money existed to help him learn to build things like his father built things, but with a degree, and the doors that a degree opens. I sat in the 3rd row, and I listened to Ernesto talk about his father. And I thought about the account I had opened when Lucas was 6 months old, and I thought, yes, this is right. I have no regret about the donation. I want to say this clearly before I tell you about Mitchell's call, because I think the story could be told as a story of revenge. You took something, and I gave it away to punish you. And that is not the story. That is not why I donated it. I donated it because the money was for education, and education could have it, and the specific relationship within which I had intended to direct it had been ended by the person I had intended to receive it. When your son disowns you, you are not obligated to hold indefinitely the plans you made as part of the relationship he ended. That is not punishment. That is clarity about what is real. The money was real. I gave it to something real. And then the 14 months ended with a phone call on a Thursday morning in April from Mitchell, asking about the college fund. He called on Sunday, as he had said he would. At 10 in the morning, while I was having coffee on the back porch, the April morning already warm enough for the porch, the garden in the specific early spring state of becoming everything green, but not yet full. "Mum," he said. "Mitchell," I said. "Can we talk?" he said. "We're talking," I said. A slight pause. He recognized. I think that this was a different version of me than the one he had known. Not colder, more settled, more willing to say the small, true thing without softening it. "I mean, really talk," he said. "Then really talk," I said. He was quiet for a moment, assembling the order of what he needed to say. I recognized this. It is a thing he has done since childhood, the brief organizational pause before the real thing. "I want to start," he said, "by saying that the letter I sent, I'm not sure I stand behind it the way I did when I sent it." "All right," I said. "Tell me more about that." "When Jenna and I wrote it," he started. I heard the "when Jenna and I wrote it." "When Jenna and I wrote it," he repeated. We were in a specific moment, in the therapy, in the conversations we were having. And there was a framework we were using that I think I applied too broadly." "What framework?" I said. "The idea that—" He paused. "The therapist talked about protecting the nuclear family from outside interference, from patterns that weren't healthy. And I think I applied that to you in ways that were more than what the situation warranted. I sat with this. What situation did it warrant? I said. I think, he said carefully, I think you and Jenna you have different ways of doing things, different values about some things, and those differences created friction, and the friction was real. And I think I let the framework take that real friction and turn it into something bigger than it was. Did Jenna draft the letter? I asked. A silence. We drafted it together, he said. Mitchell, I said, I'm going to ask you something and I need you to answer honestly. Okay, he said. In the 11 years of your marriage, I said, has Jenna ever said something critical about me to you that you believe to be fully accurate? A long pause. Not fully, he said, quietly. Has she said things about me that were partially accurate? I said. Yes, he said. Has she said things about me that were not accurate at all? I said. Another pause. Yes, he said. And when she said those things, I said, what did you do? The silence that followed this question was the longest of the call. I believed her, he said. Finally. Because she was my wife, and because it was easier. I did not say anything, because managing it was easier than questioning it, than saying, I don't think that's right, than being the person in the marriage who stood up for his mother, I said, very quiet. Yes, he said. I looked at the garden. The tulips was fully open, the red ones, every year the same reliable red. Mitchell, I said, I want to tell you something and I need you to receive it as a fact and not as an accusation. Okay, he said. I love you, I said. I have loved you since before you were born, and I have not stopped for one day in 44 years. I love you through the letter, and through the 14 months, and through the phone call on Thursday, and through this conversation. That is a constant. I know, he said. His voice had changed. What is not a constant, I said, is what I can offer a relationship that doesn't include me. The college fund was an intention that lived inside a relationship. You ended the relationship. The intention had to go somewhere. I know, he said again. I'm not going to apologize for the donation, I said. I gave it to something good. I've met the students who received the scholarships. I've sat on the committee that reviews applications. That money is building lives. I understand, he said. And to his credit, genuine credit, he said it without the bitterness I might have expected, without the, but those should have been my children's lives. Just I understand. What do you want now, I said. Not the fund. From me. From us. What are you actually calling about? A pause. I want my mother back, he said. Simple. Direct. The 9-year-old under the 44-year-old. I sat with it. Your mother has been here the whole time, I said. She answered on Thursday. She's on the phone on Sunday. She'll be here next week and the week after. I know, he said. The question, I said, is what you're going to do about the conditions that produced the letter, not what you said in it, the conditions. What was happening in your marriage that led to a 3-page typed letter to your mother? He was quiet. We've been back in therapy, he said. Jenna and I, since December. Things changed in December. What changed? I said. I can tell you more about that, he said, but not on the phone. Would you be willing to come for dinner at our house next weekend if you're free? I thought about the last time I had been to their house, the spring of year 10, Jenna's specific coolness. I thought about 14 months. I thought about Ernesto at the podium talking about his father. Yes, I said, I'm free. I drove to Maplewood on a Saturday afternoon, 45 minutes. I know every mile of it. I drove it regularly for the first years of Mitchell and Jenna's marriage, less frequently. As the years went on, not at all for the 14 months. I arrived at 6. Mitchell opened the door. He looked older than when I had last seen him. Not dramatically, but the 14 months had the specific weight of a difficult time, and it showed around his eyes in the way that difficult times show. He hugged me. A real hug, not the managed, careful hug of the later years of our relationship, but something that had more reach to it. The hug of a person who has been without something and is holding it now. I let him. The house was warm. It smelled like the chicken roasting in the oven, which was, Mitchell said, his recipe, not Jenna's, his. He had apparently taken to cooking in the last year, which he told me with the specific pride of someone who has discovered something they are good at late. The children were there. Lucas, 18, now legally an adult, taller than I remembered, with the specific self-consciousness of a young man who is not sure how to be in a room with a grandmother he hasn't seen in over a year. Maya, 15, who came into the room and looked at me and said with the directness that 15-year-olds sometimes have, "Hi, Grandma Vivian. I've missed you." I held that for a moment. "I've missed you too, Maya," I said. Caden, 12, who had been 9 the last time I had seen him regularly, and who was now taller and different in the specific way of children between 9 and 12, who treated the event with the particular equanimity of a youngest child, who has learned that the adults around him have complicated feelings and that the best response is to proceed normally. He asked me if I liked soccer, which he had taken up in my absence, and we talked about soccer for 15 minutes before dinner. Jenna. I want to tell you about Jenna at the dinner with the same care I have tried to tell you about everything else, because this is where the easy version of the story diverges from the true version. The easy version, Jenna was cold and resistant, and the evening confirmed that she was the architect of the disowning. The true version, Jenna was present. Not warm in the way I had hoped for, not apologetic in the way Mitchell had been on the phone, but present in the room at the table, engaging in the conversation, not absent or hostile, or performing a hostility she had abandoned. She asked about the garden. She knew about the expansion into the side yard, because Mitchell had told her apparently about our calls. She asked about the foundation. Mitchell told me about the scholarships, she said, about the ceremony in November. He said you spoke. I was on the committee, I said. I helped select the recipients, and I attended the ceremony. Was it what you hoped? She said. I looked at her. It was more, I said. She nodded. She did not say anything about the college fund. Not at dinner, not afterward. I did not raise it. The money was gone, and it was in its right place, and raising it would have served nothing except to create a scene that the evening had been designed to move past, and I had agreed to move past it by accepting the dinner invitation. After dinner, while Mitchell and the children did the dishes, he had instituted a family dish-doing practice, apparently which the children received with the grumbling compliance of children who have been told to do something useful. Jenna and I were in the living room, alone briefly. She said, I know what I owe you. I looked at her. An apology, she said, a real one. I'm working on it. I wanted you to know that I know. I sat with this. It was not the apology, it was the acknowledgement that an apology existed to be made, which is not nothing. In fact, from a person with Jenna's specific architecture around apologies and admission of fault, it was considerably more than nothing. I appreciate that, I said. It may take me some time, she said. I have time, I said. She looked at me for a moment. My mother, she started. Stopped. Tried again. My mother's relationship with me is she has strong opinions about how things should be, and I came into this marriage very oriented toward protecting what we were building from what I'd seen her deal with. I understand, I said. I think I overcorrected, she said. 2 words. Overcorrected. From Jenna, who does not use words carelessly, this was the closest thing to I was wrong that the evening was going to produce. I see that now, she said. Okay, I said. Mitchell came back from the kitchen. He looked between us. Everything all right? He said. Fine, I said. Tell me about the chicken. What did you put in it? His face opened in the way faces open when you ask someone about something they're proud of. He told me about the chicken. I listened. We stayed until 9. Driving home in the dark, I thought about the dinner and about Jenna's I know what I owe you, and about Mitchell's chicken, which had been, I will say, genuinely good. I thought about the tulips in the garden, I thought about Ernesto at the podium. I thought about the scholarship review committee, which met again in the spring, and about the applications I would read. I thought about an account at First National Bank that no longer existed in the form Mitchell had expected. And I thought, we are here now. That is something. That is where we start. It has been 6 months since the dinner. 6 months is not long enough to say that things have been rebuilt. I want to be honest about that. Rebuilt implies a finished structure, and what we have is scaffolding, some of it new, some of it still being tested. Mitchell and I talk on Sundays, not every Sunday, most Sundays. He calls usually in the morning, and we talk for 20 to 40 minutes about things that are sometimes significant and sometimes ordinary. The ordinariness of the calls is what I find most hopeful. He came to my house last month to help me finish the side yard project, the planting that I hadn't fully completed because some of it required more lifting than my back was willing to do on its own. He spent a Saturday afternoon in my garden planting things where I told him to put them, and we talked and didn't talk in the specific, comfortable way of people who are learning again how to be in each other's space without managing every moment of it. At the end of the afternoon, he said, "The garden looks good." "It will look better in June," I said. "I'll come back in June," he said. "I'll be here," I said. He came back in June. He brought Caden, who wanted to see the garden, and who had apparently taken an interest in growing things at school, and who spent an hour examining what I'd planted with the focused attention of a 12-year-old who has found something that interests him. Caden now calls me Grandma Vivian. "It's 2 names, he told me when I asked about it." "It is?" I said. "I like both of them," he said. "So do I said. Maya has texted me 3 times in the past month. Not long texts, brief ones. The texting style of teenagers, single thoughts or questions, or occasionally a photograph of something she thought I'd like. One photograph was of a book she was reading, a novel I had mentioned once years ago at a dinner when she was 13 and apparently listening. She texted, "Finally reading this. You were right." I texted back, "Tell me what you think." She sent me 3 paragraphs about the book. They were good paragraphs. Lucas is at university now. He began in September, the fall semester of his freshman year. He is studying environmental science, which I find encouraging. He texted me on his first day a brief message that said, "Starting college, thought you should know." I texted back, "I'm glad you told me. Good luck." He texted, "Thanks, Grandma V." Grandma V, not Vivian, not Grandma. Grandma V, the nickname of a child who is figuring out how to be in relationship with a grandmother he spent 14 months not seeing, who is finding his own language for it. I'll take Grandma V. The scholarship committee met in April. We reviewed 11 applications for 3 available scholarships. We discussed each one, the circumstances, the academic record, the essays, the specific picture of a young person at the edge of something significant. We awarded 3 scholarships. One of them went to a young woman from Harlow named Destiny, who is the first person in her family to attend a 4-year university, who wants to study nursing, whose application essay was about her grandmother. I read that essay 3 times. The first time for content. The second time more carefully. The third time because I wanted to sit with it. Her grandmother had worked in a hospital laundry for 30 years. Destiny wrote about visiting her as a child, watching the efficiency of her grandmother's work. Learning from her that everything that required doing deserved to be done well, including the things that were invisible. The laundry was invisible. It kept people clean and safe and comfortable. No one thanked her grandmother. She did it anyway for 30 years, and now her granddaughter was going to nursing school. I thought about the account at First National Bank. I thought about $200 on a Tuesday in April 18 years ago. I thought about what compounds when you leave it alone and add to it steadily. Not just money. Everything. Let me tell you what this taught me. The real things. The first thing is about the nature of plans. I had a plan for that money. The plan was save for 18 years, give to the grandchildren when they're ready for college, watch them go. The plan assumed a relationship within which the giving would happen. The relationship was changed by someone else's decision. What I learned is that our plans exist within relationships, and when the relationships change, the plans must change too, not as punishment, as accuracy. Keeping the plan while the relationship had fundamentally changed would have been its own kind of dishonesty, a pretending that things were as they had been when they were not. The money needed a new plan. The new plan was better. I say this not to comfort myself, though it does comfort me, and I will not pretend it doesn't, but because it is true. The money in the hands of the Harlow Community Education Foundation is doing more than it would have done as a contribution to the college costs of 3 children who come from a comfortable 2-income professional household. Lucas Meyer and Caden will go to college. Mitchell and Jenna have the means to help them. The resources I gave to the foundation are helping students who would not otherwise have the means. That is a better use of the money. I can hold both things, the sadness of the plan that was disrupted and the rightness of where it went simultaneously. The second thing, the letter, was a gift. I know this sounds strange, but hear me out. Before the letter, I was managing. I had been managing for 10 years, managing the erosion, managing my responses to Jenna's coolness, managing my reduced place in the family without naming what I was managing or why. I had gotten very good at management and very bad at clarity. The letter forced clarity. It said in 3 typed pages, "This is what the situation is. This is how I have defined it. This is what I am choosing." And that clarity, as painful as it was, gave me something that 10 years of management had not given me the freedom to make my own clear choices in response to clear reality. I donated the money because the situation was clear. I did not spend 14 months trying to figure out what the situation was, or whether it was as bad as it seemed, or what I should do in case it improved on its own. It was clear. I responded to what was clear. If you are in a relationship that is being managed into ambiguity, where nothing is said directly, where everything is hinted and suggested and communicated through behavior rather than words, I want to offer you the thought that clarity, even painful clarity, is a gift. You cannot make good decisions from fog. The third thing, the 14 months were not wasted. I know this sounds counterintuitive. 14 months of being shut out of my son's life, of not seeing the grandchildren, of living with the weight of a letter that said, "You are not my family," these months were not wasted. They were months in which I was in the garden, months in which I expanded the garden into the side yard, months in which I read applications for scholarships and thought about what young people need to build their lives, months in which Angela called on Sundays and came on Thursdays and was my daughter without conditions and without management, months in which I learned with some precision what I valued when I was not in the business of being acceptable to someone who did not want to accept me, what I valued: the garden, the work with the foundation, Angela and Carl and the girls who sat at my kitchen table and did their homework, the tulips that come up every year, the patients I had served for 34 years, the pharmacist's knowledge that what matters is getting the right thing to the right person. None of those things required Mitchell's approval. None of those things were suspended during the 14 months. The clarity of what matters when you are no longer managing someone else's comfort is one of the most useful clarities available. The fourth thing is for parents who are where I was, who feel the erosion, but cannot name it, who are managing, because naming it seems like it would make things worse. It might make things worse. It might also be the only thing that can make things better. The letter Mitchell sent was, in its way, him finally naming it. Finally saying, "This is the situation I am being clear about. It respond to what is real." I responded to what was real. And real, though more painful than managed, was where things actually changed. The managed version of things will not produce change. It will produce more management, more erosion, more of the situation you are already in. Say the real thing, not cruelly, not in a way designed to wound, but clearly to the person who needs to hear it in a way that allows a real response. The conversation I needed to have with Mitchell was one I should have initiated 5 years before he initiated it by letter. I should have sat with him and said, "I feel the erosion. I see what's happening. I need us to talk about it directly before it gets to a place where it can't be talked about." I didn't. That is my error in this story, and I own it. The fifth thing, the money was never the point. I know that might seem obvious. Of course, the money wasn't the point. The relationships are the point. But I mean something more specific. The money was the measure. It was the specific, concrete thing I had been building as an expression of my love and my place in the family. It was 20 years of $150 a month, increased to $200, then $250, with extra deposits in the good years. It was discipline and patience, and the specific act of building something for people you love who are not yet old enough to need it. And when the relationship changed, the money revealed what the relationship had been. Because you don't build a college fund for people you don't intend to be in relationship with. You don't add to it for 18 years and then donate it to scholarship students because you felt like doing something nice for strangers. You donate it to scholarship students because the relationship within which you built it has been ended, and the money deserves to go somewhere that honors what it was built for, and the scholarship students honor it completely. The money was love expressed financially over 18 years. It went where love that can't reach its intended destination should go toward people who need it. That is the story. Now I want to ask you something, because this story has several things in it that touch different people differently, and I'm curious which one lands for you. The first question was the donation, the right decision. I know how I feel about it, but I want to hear how you feel. Some of you will say absolutely. He ended the relationship. The money was built within that relationship. It was entirely within her rights to redirect it. And there's something particularly satisfying about a donation to scholarship students. She didn't spend it on herself, didn't do something spiteful. She did something genuinely good with it. Some of you will say, what about the grandchildren? They didn't write the letter. They didn't choose to be cut off from their grandmother. Why should they pay the price for their parents' choices? This is a real question, and I want to engage with it honestly. The grandchildren were not the reason I redirected the money. Mitchell's letter was. If Mitchell had said, if anyone had said, the money is for the kids, specifically they will receive it, regardless of what happens between the adults. If that had been the frame, I might have found a way to honor it. But the money was never formally designated to them. It was my money in my account, held with my intention. And my intention lived within a relationship. The relationship changed. The grandchildren have a father with a good income and a mother with a good income. And as of 6 months ago, a grandmother who is back in their lives and who is, I believe, going to be there for a long time. They will be okay. The scholarship students also need to be okay. And they were not going to be okay without help that was available. The second question, what would you do differently? If you were me 18 years ago, opening an account for your grandchildren in a relationship that would 11 years later be formally ended by letter, what would you do differently? I have an answer. I would formalize it. I would not put money in an account with an intention that lived only in my head and Mitchell's general awareness. I would sit down with a financial advisor and create a formal vehicle, a 529 plan, a trust something with documentation and clear beneficiaries that would separate the children's money from the state of the adult relationships. I didn't do this, partly because I didn't think we'd ever be in a situation where it mattered, partly because I operate on intention more than documentation, which is a pharmacist's limitation in pharmacy. We document everything, but in family. I assumed goodwill was its own document. It isn't. Document things. Even in family. Especially in family. The third question is for anyone who has a Mitchell in their life, a son or daughter who has at some point let a spouse's view of you crowd out their own. I want to say something that is not about blame. When Mitchell said on the Sunday call, I believed her because it was easier, I understood that. Not because it was right, but because I understand the specific pressure of a marriage in which one person has a strong and consistent position, and the path of least resistance is to orient yourself toward it. It is not a failure of love, it is a failure of courage. a small failure of the kind that most people commit at some point in lives that involve love and conflict, and the ongoing negotiation of two people becoming a unit. If you have been Mitchell, if you have let someone's version of a parent become your version, because the alternative required a harder conversation, I want to ask you, what is the cost? Not to your parent, to you. Because Mitchell's Sunday call, "I want my mother back," was not just about missing me. It was about having been for 14 months someone he didn't fully recognize. Someone who had signed his name to a 3-page letter and who did not, when the immediate pressure had passed, entirely stand behind what he had signed. That is its own price. The fourth question is about money and family, which is where this story started and where it continues to live in the lives of everyone involved. When you give money to family, when you save, when you plan, when you build something for the people you love, what are you building exactly? Is it a fund? Or is it a relationship expressed financially? Because if it is the second thing, and I believe for most of us it is the second thing, then it is inseparable from the relationship. And when the relationship changes, the financial expression of it changes too. The $80,000 was not just money. It was 20 years of "you matter to me and I am planning for you." And when I was told I didn't matter formally in a letter, the planning had to go somewhere else. It went to students who needed it. And they are going to college, and Destiny is going to be a nurse, like her grandmother. Was the laundry invisible and essential? And somewhere in a university in this state, Lucas is studying environmental science, and Maya is reading the book I mentioned when she was 13, and Caden calls me Grandma Vivian because he likes both names. And the tulips come up every April, regardless of what happened in the year before. Leave me a comment. Tell me what you would have done with the money. Tell me if you have a Mitchell or if you are one. Tell me about the plans you made for someone who changed the relationship they were built within. Tell me about the thing you did with what you knew. I read every comment. I'm Vivian. The garden is in full June bloom. Mitchell came back as he said he would. We planted things where I told him to put them. They are growing.